And I'm yeah. So, hello everyone. We are currently back after my big old Londonathon, which went pretty well. My voice is still a little off from the 6 hours of straight reading, so I might be a little hoarse today, but I didn't do anything yesterday and I felt bored, so I thought we'd get back into it, do a little bit today. Still been taking it pretty easy. We didn't go out in the library and get any. Well, we didn't go out in the library to get anything much. I mean, like, no new books is what I'll say. So we still got just the 3 leftover Jack Londons from the Donathon. It was short stories, and then the Seawolf, which I don't know if I'm going to tackle that anytime soon. I'm sort of debating letting my voice sort of build up again, and then maybe doing like a big single reading of that, or trying that. I don't know really. I've realised I'm not super good at figuring out exactly how long it's going to take me to read a given thing, so I don't know. I might try and tackle that in a single go and then see how we get on, but like, I don't know. We'll see how we do. But yeah, 6 hours of reading is rough on the throat, turns out. It's just as well for me that I didn't have much more to do than that. I expect it would have gone badly for me. Still, we pushed on, And so today we got these 3 here, these last 3 short stories that we've got to read. And they are Nam-Bok the Unveracious, the Apostate, and Laura Laugh, which should be reasonably quick to get through. I checked the length on all of these, and none of them is as long as Wonder Woman was during the Donathon, so I think probably this is an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours of reading. But we'll see. But yeah, it shouldn't be too much longer than that anyway. So, oh, I haven't done my little introduction ever, because I'm assuming people know me now. You do one event. Right, for anyone who is new here, my name is SkitterSkreetch. I am, as you can visibly see, a tiny little rat, and I'm trapped in a giant cursed library. To be clear, I don't mean a giant cursed library like this is a giant cursed library. This is a single room inside of a giant cursed library that I've set aside to sort of build up these shelves and keep some books in. And then I read these books, because that lamp you can see in the top right corner makes me do it. Why it does this is not entirely clear to me. Actually, let's go say it. Now, why is it you make me read these books? Right, I should also explain that Lamp talks to me telepathically. So when I'm talking to him, you can't actually hear what he's saying. So I always think I should go talk to Lamp. He's interesting. He's got things going on. He's vital to this. And then I'm like, oh yeah, you guys can't hear Lamp. That makes the interview and Lamp actually quite a dull thing for you guys. You can't hear him say that he's what do you call it, guided by the principles that guided the order and such, you know? You just have to take my word for it. And I wouldn't trust me. I'm a rat. I'm terribly a liar. So you certainly can't trust me that I'm saying anything at all. You might not. For all you guys know, this and that might not even really talk. I might just be crazy. Huh. Well, right, where are we? Oh, no, too far down. Here we are. So yeah. But yeah, so we got what was the sense? Yeah, I read books down here. SkitterSkreetch is my name. That's what we do around here. We're not entirely clear why, but we do it. Anyway, but yeah. So as always, I'll go through these probably all the way through because they're short stories before I do a little bit of commentary afterwards, just to talk about them. If at any point I've read something too fast or said it unclearly and you need me to go back over it, let me know and I'm happy to do that. If you have any thoughts, I'm always happy to hear what you have to say and chat with you. I don't have any shout-outs, got no new followers recently. Oh, actually, there is something I should say. On this Tuesday, for the holiday of Cinco de Mayo, I am going to be going over to hang out with my good friend Discipline, who's a moth. By which I mean we're going to be chatting voice to voice. I cannot actually leave this library, but we're going to go over there and we're going to read. Where is it? Here it is. Ooh. Pointing with my nose. The Mexican for Cinco de Mayo, which is, it's about the Mexican Revolution rather than the French-Mexican War, which is what the holiday is celebrating. But I think that's close enough. And then, depending on how things go, we might do another couple. But yeah, I'm going to be reading over there. He's going to be playing something chill. We're going to hang out. It'll be nice. I'm hoping I can get tacos, but I've got no way of actually getting them. And Lamp has been very reticent to offer me food that is not cheese. So, you know, I am intrigued though. But yeah, yeah. So that's happening. If you're interested, do go check that out. That'll be, like I said, Tuesday, 5th of May, at 6 p.m. EST. So yeah, well, thereabouts anyway. We're keeping it casual. We're gonna be, yeah. But anyway, where were we? Yeah. So anyway, need me to repeat something? Let me know if you've got any thoughts. I'm happy to chat. Blah 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 blah. Let's get into it. Oof. You do one event, you lose your power. Right. So, Nam-Bok the Unveracious. A Bidaka, is it not, sir? Look, a Bidaka, and one man who drives clumsy with a paddle. Old Basqua Wan rose to her knees, trembling with weakness and eagerness, and gazed out over the sea. Nam-Bok was ever clumsy at the paddle, she maundered reminiscently, shading the sun from her eyes and staring across the silver smooth water. Nam-Bok were ever clumsy, I remember. The women and children laughed loudly, and there was a gentle mockery in their laughter, and her voice dwindled till her lips moved without sound. Cougar lifted his grizzled head from his bone carving and followed the path of her eyes. Except when wide yaws took it off its course, a bit darker was heading in for the beach. Its occupant were paddling with more strength and dexterity, and made his approach along the zigzag line of most resistance. Cougar's head dropped to his work again, and on the ivory tusk between his knees he scratched the dorsal fin of a fish, the likes of which had never swam the sea. "It is doubtless the man from the next village," he said finally, "come to consult with me about the marking of things on bone. And the man is a clumsy man. He will never know how." "It is Nam-Bok," old Basqua repeated. "Should I not know my son?" she demanded shrilly. "I say and I say again, it is Nam-Bok." "And so thou hast said these many summers," said one of the women chided softly. "Even when the ice passed out of the seas, as thou sat and watched through the long day, saying with each chance canoe, there is Nam-Bok. Nam-Bok is dead, old Basqua, and the dead do not come back. It cannot be that the dead come back." "Nam-Bok," the old woman cried, so loud and clear that the old village was startled and looked at her. She struggled to her feet and tottered down on the sand. She stumbled over a baby lying in the sun, and the mother hushed its cry and hurried harsh words after the old woman, who took no notice. The children ran down the beach in advance of her, and as the man and the Bidaka grew close, nearly capsizing with one of his ill-directed strokes, the women followed. Cougar dropped his walrus tusk and went also, leaning heavily upon his staff, and after him loitered the men in twos and threes. The Bidaka turned broadside, and the ripple of the surf threatened to swamp it. Only a naked boy ran to the water and pulled the bow high up on the sand. The man stood up and sent a questing glance along the line of the villagers. A rainbow sweater, dirty and the worse for wear, clung loosely to his broad shoulders, and a red cotton handkerchief was knotted in sailor fashion about his throat. A fisherman's tam o' shanter on his close-clipped head, and dungaree trousers and heavy brogans completed his outfit. But he was nonetheless a striking personage to these simple fisherfolk of the great Yukon Delta, who all their lives had stared out on Bering Sea and, in that time, but seen but two white men, a census enumerator and a lost Jesuit priest. They were a poor people, with neither gold in the ground nor valuable furs in hand, so the whites had passed them afar. Also the Yukon, through the thousands of years, had shoaled that portion of the sea with the detritus of Alaska, till vessels grounded out of sight of land. So the southern coast, with its long inside reaches and huge mud-lined archipelagos, were avoided by the ships of men, and the fisherfolk knew not that such things were. Cougar, the bone-scratcher, retreated backwards and in sudden haste, tripping over his staff and falling on the ground. "Nam-Bok," he cried as he scrambled wildly for them. "Nam-Bok, who were blown off the sea, come back." The men and women shrank away, and the children scuttled off between their legs. Only O.P. Kwan was brave, as befitted the headman of the village. He strode forward and gazed long and calmly at the newcomer. "It is Nam-Bok," he said at last, and at the conviction in his voice the women wailed apprehensively and drew further away. The lips of the stranger moved indecisively, and his brown throat writhed and wrestled with unspoken words. La, it is Nam-Bok," Basqua croaked, peering up into the face. "Ever did I say Nam-Bok would come back?" "Aye, it is Nam-Bok come back." This time it was Nam-Bok himself who spoke, putting a leg over the side of the Bidaka and standing with one foot afloat and one ashore. Again his throat writhed and wrestled as he grappled after forgotten words, and when the words come forth there was stranger sound, and a sputtering of the lips accompanied the gutturals. "Greetings, our brothers," he said. "Brothers of old time, before I went away with the offshore wind." He stepped out with both feet on the sand, and O.P. Kwan waved him back. Thou art dead, Nam-Bok, he said. Nam-Bok laughed. I am fat. Dead men are not fat, Obi-Kwan confessed. Thou hast fared well, but it is strange. No man may mate with the offshore wind and come back on the heels of the years. I have come back, Nam-Bok answered simply. Mayhap thou art a shadow then, a passing shadow of the Nam-Bok that was. Shadows come back. I am hungry. Shadows do not eat. But Obi-Kwan doubted, and brushed his hand across his brow in sore puzzlement. Nam-Bok were likewise puzzled, and as he looked up and down the line and found no welcome in the eyes of the fisher folk. The men and women whispered together, the children stole timidly back among their elders, and bristling dogs fawned up to him and sniffed suspiciously. I bore thee, Nam-Bok, and I gave thee suck when thou was little. Basque-One whimpered, drawn closer. And shadow though thou be or no shadow, I will give thee to eat now. Nam-Bok made to come to her, but a growl of fear and menace warned him back. He said something in a strange tongue which sounded like Gadam, and added, No shadow am I, but a man. Who may know concerning the things of mystery? Obi-Kwan demanded, half of himself and half of his tribespeople. We are, and in a breath are not, we are not. If the man may become shadow, may not the shadow become man? Nam-Bok was, but it is not. This we know, but we do not know if this be Nam-Bok or the shadow of Nam-Bok. Nam-Bok cleared his throat and made answer. In the old time, long ago, our father's father, Obi-Kwan, went away and came back on the heels of the years. Nor was a place by the fire denied him. It is said, he paused significantly and they hung on his utterance. It is said, he repeated, driving his point home with deliberation, that Sip-Sip, his klooch, bore him 2 sons after he come back. But he had no dealings with the offshore wind, Obi-Kwan retorted. He went away in the yard of the land, and it is in the nature of things that a man may go on into the land, and likewise the sea, but that is neither here nor there. It is said that thy father's father told strange tales of the things he saw. Aye, strange tales he told. I too have strange tales to tell, Nam-Bok stated insidiously, and as they wavered, and presents likewise. He pulled from the Bidaka a shawl, marvellous of texture and colour, and flung it about his mother's shoulders. The women voiced a collective sigh of admiration, and old Basque-One ruffled the gay material and patted it and crooned in childish joy. He has tales to tell. Oh no, he has tales to tell, and presents. And presents, a woman said. And Obi-Kwan knew that his people were eager, and further he were aware himself of an itching curiosity concerning these untold tales. The fishing has been good, he said judiciously, and we have oil in plenty. So come, Nam-Bok, let us feast. 2 of the men hoisted the Bidaka on their shoulders and carried it up to the fire. Nam-Bok walked by the side of Obi-Kwan, and the villagers followed after, save those of the women who lingered a moment and lay caressing fingers on the shawl. There were little talk while the feast went on, though many and curious were the glances stolen at the son of Basque-One. This embarrassed him, not because he was modest of spirit, however, but for the fact that the stench of the seal oil had robbed him of his appetite, and that he keenly desired to conceal his feelings on the subject. Eat, thou art hungry, Obi-Kwan commanded, and Nam-Bok shut both his eyes and shoved his fist into the big pot of putrid fish. And be not ashamed. The seal were many this year and strong. Men are ever hungry. And Basque-One sopped a particularly offensive chunk of salmon into the oil and passed it fondly and dripped to her son. In despair, when premonitory symptoms warned him that his stomach was not so strong as of old, he filled his pipe and struck up smoke. The people fed on noisily and watched. Few of them could boast of intimate acquaintance with the precious weed, and now and again small quantities and abominable qualities were obtained in trade from the Eskimos to the northward. Cougar, sitting next to him, indicated that he was not averse to taking a draw, and between 2 mouthfuls, with the oil so thick on his lips, sucked away on the amber stem, and thereupon Nam-Bok held his stomach with a shaky hand and declined the proffered return. Cougar could keep the pipe, he said, for he had intended to so honour him from the first, and the people lit their fingers and approved of his liberality. Obi-Kwan rose to his feet. And now, Nam-Bok, the feast is ended, and we would listen concerning the strange things you have seen. The fisher-folk applauded with their hands, and gathered about them their work, prepared to listen. The men were busy fashioning spears and carving on ivory, while the women scraped the fat from the eyes of the air seal and made them pliable, or sewed nooklooks with threads of sinew. Nam-Bok's eyes roved over the scene. There were not the charm about it that his recollection had warranted him to expect. During the years of his wandering he had looked forward to just this scene, and now it had come he was disappointed. It were a bare and meagre laugh, he deemed, and not to be compared to the one which he had become used. Still, he would open their eyes a bit, and his own eyes sparkled at the thought. Brothers, he began with the smug complacency of a man about to relate the big things he has done. It was late summer and many summers back, when, with much such weather as this promises to be, when I went away. You all remember the day when the gulls flew low and the wind blew strong from the land, and I could not hold my Badaka against it. I tied the covering of the Badaka about me so the water could not get, so that no water could get in, and all of the night I fought with the storm, and in the morning there were no land. Only the sea and the offshore wind held me close in its arms and bore me along. 3 such nights widened into dawn and showed me no land, and the offshore wind would not let me go. And when the 4th day come, I was a madman. I could not lift my taddle for want of food, and my head went round and round, what with the thirst that were upon me. The sea were no longer angry, and the soft south wind were blowing, and as I looked about me I saw a sight that made me think I were indeed mad. Nam-Bok paused to pick away a sliver of salmon lost between his teeth, and the men and women with idle hands and head craned forward waiting. It were a canoe, a big canoe. Of all the canoes I have ever seen were made into one canoe, it could not be so large. There were exclamations of doubt, and Cougar, whose years were many, shook his head. If each Badaka was as a grain of sand, If each Badaka were as a grain of sand, Nam-Bok defiantly continued, and if still there were as many Badakas as there be grains of sand in this beach, still would they not make so big a canoe as this. I saw in the morning of the 4th day. It were a very big canoe, and it were called a schooner. I saw this thing a wonder, this great schooner coming after me, and on it I saw men. Hold her, Nam-Bok, Openquee broke in. What manner of men were they? Big men? Nay, they were men like you and me. Did the big canoe come fast? Aye. The sides were tall, the men short, Openquee stated the premise with conviction. And did these men dip with long paddles? Nam-Bok grinned. There were no paddles, he said. Mouths remained open, and a long silence dropped down. Opequan borrowed Cougar's pipe for a couple of contemplative sucks. One of the younger women giggled nervously and drew upon herself angry eyes. There were no paddles, Opequan asked softly, returning the pipe. The south wind blew beyond. Well, no, the south wind was beyond, Nam-Bok explained. But the wind drifted slow. The schooner had wings, thus. He sketched a diagram of masts and sails in the sand, and the men crowded around and studied it. The wind was blowing briskly, and for a more graphic elucidation he squeezed the corners of his mother's shawl and spread them out till it bellowed like a sail. Basquawan scolded and struggled, but were blown down the beach for a score of feet and left breathless and stranded beneath the driftwood. The men uttered sage grunts of comprehension, but Cougar suddenly tossed back his hoary head. Ha ha, he laughed. A foolish thing, this big canoe. A most foolish thing. A plaything of the wind. Wheresoever the wind goes, it goes too. No man who journeys therein may name the land and beach, for always he goes with the wind. And the wind goes everywhere, but no man knows where. It is so, Opequan supplemented gravely. With the wind the going is easy, but against the wind a man striveth hard. And for all that they had no paddles, these men on this big canoe did not strive at all. Small need to strive, Nam-Bok cried angrily. The schooner went likewise against the wind. And what said you made the schooner go? Cougar asked, tripping craftily over the strange word. The wind, was the impatient response. And the wind made the schooner go against the wind. Old Cougar dropped it openly to Opequan, and the laughter growing around him continued. The wind blows from the south and blows the schooner south. The wind blows against the wind. The wind blows one way and the other way at the same time. It's very simple. We understand, Nam-Bok. We clearly understand. Thou art a fool. Truth falls from thy lips, Cougar answered meekly. I were overlong in understanding, and the thing was simple. But Nam-Bok's face was dark, and he said rapid words which they had never heard before. Bone scratching and skin scraping resumed, but he shut his lips tightly on his tongue and could not be believed. It could not be believed. This schooner, Cougar imperturbably asked, it were made of a big tree? It were made of many trees, Nam-Bok snapped shortly. It were very big. He lapsed into sullen silence again, and Opequan nudged Cougar, who shook his head with slow amazement and murmured, It is very strange. Nam-Bok took the bait. That is nothing, he said airily. You should see the steamer. As the grain of sand is to the Badaka is to the schooner, and so the schooner is to the steamer. Further, the steamer is made of iron. It is all iron. Nay, Nam-Bok, cried the headman, how can that be? Always iron goes to the bottom. But behold, I received an iron knife in trade from the headman of the next village, and yesterday the iron knife slipped from my fingers and went down into the sea. To all things there be a law. Never is there one thing outside the law. This we know. And moreover we know that things of a kind have the one law, and that all iron is the one law. So unsay thy words, Nam-Bok, that we may yet honour thee. It is so, Nam-Bok persisted. The steamer is all iron and does not sink. Nay, this cannot be. With my own eyes I saw it. It is not the nature of things. But tell me, Nam-Bok, Cougar interrupted, for fear the tale would go no further. Tell me the manner of these men in finding their way across the sea when there is no land by which to steer. There's some points out the path, but at midday the headman of the schooner takes a thing through which his eye looks at the sun, and then he makes the sun climb down out of the sky and the edge of the earth. Now this be evil medicine, cried Obi-Kwan, aghast at the sacrilege. The men held up their hands in horror, and the woman moaned. This be evil medicine. It is not good to misdirect the great sun which drives away the night and gives us the seal, the salmon, and the warm weather. What if it be evil medicine? Nam-Bok demanded truculently. I too have looked through the thing at the sun and made the sun climb down out of the sky. Those who were nearest drew away from him hurriedly, and the woman covered the face of a child at her breast, so his eye might not fall upon it. On the morning of the fourth day, O Nam-Bok, Cougar suggested, on the morning of the fourth day, when the schooner came after thee, I had little strength left in me and could not run away, so I was taken on board, and water was poured down my throat, and good food given me. Twice, my brothers, you have seen a white man. These men were all white, and as many as I have fingers and toes. When I saw they were full of kindness, I took heart, and I resolved to bring away with me a report of all I saw. And they taught me the work they did, and gave me good food and a place to sleep. And day after day we went over the sea, and each day the headman drew the sun down out of the sky and made it tell where we were. And when the waves were calm, we hunted the fur seal, and I marvelled much, for always did they fling the meat and flat away, and save only the skin. Obi-Kwan's mouth was twitching violently, and we were about to make a denunciation of such waste, when Cougar kicked him to be still. After a weary time, when the sun were gone, and the bite of the frost coming in the air, the headman pointed the nose of the schooner south. South and east we travelled for days upon days, when near the land in sight, and we were near to the village from which hailed the men. How did they know they were near? Obi-Kwan, unable to contain himself longer, demanded. There was no land to see. Nam-Bok glowered at him wrathfully. Did I not say the headman brought the sun down out of the sky? Cougar interposed, and Nam-Bok went on. As I say, when we were near to that village, a great storm blew up, and in the night we were helpless and knew not where we were. Now, as just said, the headman knew. Oh, peace, Obi-Kwan, thou art a fool and cannot understand. As I say, we were helpless in the night, when I heard above the roar of the storm a sound of the sea on the beach, and next we struck with a mighty crash and are in the water swimming. We were a rock-bound coast with one patch of beach in many miles, and the law was that I should dig my hands into the sand and draw myself clear of the surf. The other men must have pounded against the rocks, for none of them came ashore but the headman, and him I knew only by the ring on his finger. When day came, there being nothing on the schooner, I turned my face to the land and journeyed into it that I might get food and look upon the faces of the people. And when I come to an house, I would take it in and give them to eat, for I had learned their speech, and the white men are ever kindly. They were an house bigger than all the houses built by us and our fathers before us. It were a mighty house, Cougar said, masking his unbelief with wonder. Many trees went into making such a house, Obi-Kwan added, taking the cue. That is nothing, Nam-Bok shrugged his shoulders in belligerent fashion. As our houses are to that house, so that house was to the houses I was yet to see. And they are not big men? Nay, mere men like you and me, Nam-Bok answered. I cut a stick that I might walk in comfort, and remembering that I were to bring a report to you, my brothers, I cut a notch in the stick for each person who lived in that house. And I stayed there many days, and worked for which they gave me money, a thing of which you know nothing, but which is very good. And one day I departed from that place to go further into the land. And as I walked, I met many people, and I cut smaller notches in the stick. There might be room for all. And then I come upon a strange thing. On the ground before me were a bar of iron as big in thickness as my arm, and a long step away from me was another bar of iron. Thou art a rich man, Obi-Kwan aside, for iron be worth more than anything else in the world. It would have made many knives. Nay, it was not mine. It was a find, and a find be lawful. Not so. The white men had placed it there. And further, these bars were so long that no man could carry them away. So long that as far as I could see there were no end to them. Nam-Bok, that is very much iron, Obi-Kwan cautioned. Aye, it was hard to believe with my own eyes upon it, but I could not gainsay my eyes. And as I looked, I heard. He turned abruptly upon the headman. Obi-Kwan, thou hast heard the sea lion bellow in his anger. Make it plain in their mind of as many sea lions as there are be waves on the sea. And make it plain that all these sea lions made into one sea lion, And as that one sea lion would bellow, so bellowed the thing I heard. The fisherfolk cried aloud in astonishment, and Opie-Kwan's jaw lowered and remained lowered. And in the distance I saw a monster like unto 1,000 whales. It were one-eyed and vomited smoke, and it snorted with exceeding loudness. I were afraid and ran with shaking legs along the path between the bars, but it came with the speed of the wind, this monster, and I leaped the iron bars with its breath hot on my face. Opie-Kwan gained control of his jaw again. And then, O Nam-Bok, it came by on the iron bars and harmed me not, and when my legs could hold me up again it were gone from sight, and it's a very far common thing in that country. Even the women and children aren't afraid. Men make them do work, these monsters. As we make our dogs do work? Cougar asked, with a sceptic twinkle in his eye. Aye, as we make our dogs do work. And how do they breed these things? Opie-Kwan questioned. They breed not at all. Men fashion them cunningly out of iron and feed them with stone and give them water to drink. The stone becomes fire and the water becomes steam, and the steam of the water is the breath of their nostrils, and there, O Nam-Bok, Opie-Kwan interrupted. Tell us of other wonders. We grow tired of this which we may not understand. You do not understand? Nam-Bok asked despairingly. Nay, we do not understand, the men and women wailed back. We cannot understand. Nam-Bok thought of a combined harvester, that the machines wherein visions of living men were to be seen, and of the machines from which came the voices of men, and he knew his people could never understand. Dare I say I rode this iron monster through the land? He asked bitterly. Opie-Kwan threw his hands, palms outward in open incredulity. Say on, say anything, we listen. Then did I ride the iron monster, for which I gave money. I said it were fed with stone. And likewise, therefore, I said money was a thing of which you know nothing. As I say, I rode the monster through the land and through many villages until I come to a big village on a salt arm of the sea. And the houses shoved their roofs among the stars in the sky, and the clouds drifted by them, and everywhere there was much smoke. And the roar of that village was like the roar of the sea in storm. The people were so many that I flung away my stick and no longer remembered the notches upon it. Had thou made small notches? Cougar reproved. I might have brought report. Nam-Bok whirled upon him in anger. Had I made small notches? Listen, Cougar, thou scratcher of bones. If I had made small notches, neither the stick nor 20 sticks could have borne them, nay, not all the driftwood of all the beaches between this village and the next. And if all of you, the women and children as well, were 20 times as many, if you had 20 hands each, and in each hand a stick and a knife, still the notches could not be cut for all the people I saw. So many were they, and so fast did they come and go. There cannot be so many people in all the world, Opie-Kwan objected, for he was stunned, and his mind could not grasp its magnitude and numbers. What dost thou know of the world, all the world, and how large it is? Nam-Bok demanded. There cannot be so many people in one place. Who art thou to say what can be and what cannot be? It stands to reason there cannot be so many people in one place. Their canoes would clutter the sea till there was no room, and they would empty the sea each day of its fish, and they would not all be fed. So it would seem, Nam-Bok made an answer. Yet it was so. With my own eyes I saw, and flung my stick away. He yawned heavily and rose to his feet. I have paddled far. The day has been long and I am tired. Now I will sleep, but tomorrow we will have further talk upon things I have seen. Pasquale wan, hobbling fearfully in advance, proud indeed, yet awed by a wonderful sun, led him to her igloo and stowed him away among the greasy eel-smelling ferns. But the men lingered by the fire, and a council was held, wherein there were much whispering and low-voiced discussion. An hour passed and a second, and Nam-Bok slept, and the talk went on. The evening sun dipped towards the northwest, and at 11 at night was clearly due north. Then it was the Edmund and the Bone Scratcher separated themselves from the council and aroused Nam-Bok. He blinked up in their faces and turned on his side to sleep again. Opie-Kwan gripped him by the arm and kindly but firmly shook his sense back into him. Come, Nam-Bok, arise, he commanded. It be time. Another feast? Nam-Bok cried. Nay, I'm not hungry. Go on with the eating and let me sleep. Time to be gone, Cougar thundered. But Opie-Kwan spoke more softly. Thou wast but darker mate with me when we were boys, he said. Together we first chased the seal and drew the salmon from the traps. And thou didst drag me back to life, Nam-Bok, when the sea closed over me and I was sucked down to the black rocks. Together we hungered and bore the chill of the frost, and together we crawled beneath the one fur and lay close to each other. And because of these things, and the kindness in which I stood to thee, it grieves me sore that thou should return such a remarkable liar. We cannot understand, and our heads be dizzy with the things thou hast spoken. It is not good. There has been much talk in the council. Wherefore we send thee away, that our heads may remain clear and strong, and not be troubled by the unaccountable things. These things thou speakest of be shadows, Cougar took up the strain. From the shadow world thou hast brought them, and to the shadow world thou must return them. Thou bid be ready, and the trials people wait. Thou may not sleep until thou art gone. Nam-Bok were perplexed, but hearkened to the voice of the Edmund. If thou art Nam-Bok, Obi-Wan was saying, thou art a fearful and most wonderful liar. If thou art the shadow of Nam-Bok, then thou speakest of shadows, concerning which it is not good that living men have knowledge. This great village thou hast spoken of, we deem the village of shadows. Therein flood the souls of the dead, for the dead be many and the living few. The dead do not come back, never if the dead come back, save those with thy wonder tales. It is not meet that the dead come back, and should we permit it, great trouble may be our portion. Nam-Bok knew his people well, and was aware that the voice of the council was supreme. So he allowed himself to be led to the water's edge, where he was pulled aboard his Bidaka and a paddle thrust into his hand. A stray wildfowl honked somewhere to seaward, and the surf broke limply and hollowly on the sand. A dim twilight brooded over land and water, and in the north the sun smouldered, vague and untroubled, and draped about with blood-red mist. The gulls were flying low, the offshore wind blew keen and chill, and the black massed clouds behind it gave promise of bitter weather. Out of the sea thou camest, Obi-Wan shouted oracularly, and back into the sea thou goest. Thus the balance is achieved and all things brought to law. Basque-Wa-Wan limped to the frothing mark and cried, I bless thee, Nam-Bok, for thou remembered me. But Pugar, shoving Nam-Bok clear of the beach, tore the shawl from her shoulders and flung it in the Bidaka. It is cold in the long night, she wailed, and the frost is prone the nip, old bones. The thing is shadow, the bone scratcher answered, and shadows cannot keep thee warm. Nam-Bok stood up that his voice might carry. O Basque-Wa-Wan, mother that bore me, he called, listen to the words of Nam-Bok thy son. There be room in his Bidaka for two, and he would that thou camest with him. For his journey is to where there are fish and oil in plenty. There the frost comes not, and life is easy, and the things of iron do work of men. Will thou come, O Basque-Wa-Wan? She debated a moment, while the Bidaka drifted swiftly from her, then raised her voice to a quivering treble. I am old, Nam-Bok, and soon I shall pass down among the shadows, but I have no wish to go before my time. I am old, Nam-Bok, and I am afraid. A shaft of light shot across the dim-lit sea and wrapped the boat and man in splendour of red and gold. Then an hush fell upon the fisher-folk, and only was heard the moan of the offshore wind and the cries of gulls flying low in the air. And that's the end of Nam-Bok the Unveracious. That's, that story bothers me a bit. And it's not for the usual reasons where you have Jack London treating with non-white people, where there's a sort of... I mean, there is a degree of judgment, obviously, but it's not like a particularly negative judgment in this case. It's pretty clear just these are uncontacted, sort of simple people who don't have a lot of the world about them. That's the premise of the story. It doesn't seem to be done with any particular judgment, but it bothers me because it's a little bit familiar, really. You leave behind the world you know and you become something else, and you can't really go back to it. I keep talking about getting out of this library, of going back up above, but I don't think I could be a rat again, not really, not a proper one. I haven't become accustomed to nice food or nothing, but I think now I talk, I'll reason, I guess. There's too much to me to be a rat normally. I couldn't go back among the rats. So if I was to go back up there, I don't know what I would do, really. Isn't that a horrible thought, Lord? I mean, I guess it'd be not. I mean, I know I want to see the sun, and I want to eat food that isn't cheese that lamp makes, and I want to do a bunch of stuff, but I don't know if I could leave this place. I'd miss the books and my little bed, and I mean, I wouldn't miss the beasts and stuff, but I think I'd even miss Lamp. He's good company. I don't know how else to talk to the people I know on the Bird website, or even to my friends who are on here. And I don't know, really. I guess I still want to go up there. I want to be able to go out there, to be able to see the sun and do stuff, but I guess... Is this place my own now? I don't know about that. I'm not sure I like it. I've got my books here, I suppose. And them on. I've got my bed and my little table and chair that I can't sit in because it's not made for a rat. And I've got my sign on the wall and all my stuff really, my clock, my rifle, all this. It's all here. I don't know when that happened. When this place became my place. And then I become someone who couldn't go back to my home. No? I don't like that thought. I don't like that thought at all. I don't really know what to do about it. Other than, I guess, not think about it. So I'm going to have a quick drink of water. And then we're going to press right on, I guess. Right, so leaving that behind us, we're going to press on and read the Apostate, which, yeah, that's, the Apostate. Now awake me up the work, I pray the Lord I may not shirk. If I should die before the night, I pray the Lord my work's all right. Amen. That's all in italics I had to do. If you don't get up, Johnny, I won't give you a bite to eat. The threat had no effect on the boy. He gone stubbornly to sleep, fighting for its oblivion as the dreamer fights for his dream. The boy's hands loosely clenched themselves, and he made feeble spasmodic blows in the air. These blows were intended for his mother, but she betrayed practiced familiarity in avoiding them as she shook him roughly by the shoulder. "Let me alone!" It was a cry that began, muffled in the deeps of sleep, that swiftly rushed upward like a whale into passionate belligerence, and that died away and sank down in one inarticulate whine. It were a bestial cry, as of a soul in torment, filled with infinite protest and pain. But she did not mind. She was a sad-eyed, tired-faced woman, and she had grown used to this task, which she repeated every day of her life. She got a grip of the bedclothes and tried to strip them down, but the boy, ceasing his punching, clung to them desperately. In an idle at the foot of the bed, he still remained covered. Then she tried dragging his bed into the floor. The boy opposed her. She braced herself, hers with a superior weight, and the boy in bed and gave, the former instantly following the latter in order to shelter against the chill of the room that bit into his body. As he toppled on the edge of the bed, it seemed that he must fall, headlong first into the floor. The consciousness flooded up in him. He righted himself, and for a moment, perilously balanced. Then he struck the floor on his feet. On the instant, his mother seized him by the shoulders and shook him. Again his fist struck out, this time with more force and directness. At the same time his eyes opened. She released him, he was awake. "All right," he mumbled. She caught up the lamp and hurried out, leaving him in darkness. "You'll be docked," she warned him. She warned back to him. He did not mind the darkness. When he had got into his clothes, he went out into the kitchen. His tread was very heavy, for so thin and light a boy. His legs dragged with their own weight, which seemed unreasonable, because they were such skinny legs. He drew a broken-bottomed chair to the table. "Johnny!" his mother called sharply. He rose sharply from the chair and, without a word, went to the sink. It was a greasy, filthy sink. The smell came up from the outlet. He took no notice of it. The sink should smell was to him part of the natural order, just as it were part of the natural order that the soap should be grimy with dishwater and a hard. The soap should be grimy with dishwater and hard to lather. Nor did he try very hard to make it lather. Several splashes of the cold water from the running faucet completed the function. He did not wash his teeth. For that matter, he had never seen a toothbrush, nor did he know that there existed beings in the world who were guilty of so great a foolishness as tooth washing. "You might wash yourself once a day without being told," his mother complained. She was holding the broken lid on the pot, and she poured 2 cups of coffee. He made no remark, for this was a standing quarrel between them, and the one thing upon which his mother was hard as adamant. Once a day it was compulsory that he should wash his face. He dried himself on a greasy towel, damp and dirty and ragged, that left his face covered with shreds of lint. "I wish we didn't live so far away," she said as she sat down. "I try to do the best I can, you know that. But $1 on the rent is such a saving, and we've more room here, you know that." He scarcely followed her. He had heard it all before many times. The range of her thought were limited, and she was ever harking back the hardship worked upon them by living so far from the mills. "Dollar means more grubbed," he remarked sensuously. "I'd sooner do the walking and get the grub." He ate hurriedly, half chewing the bread and washing the masticated trunks down with coffee. The hot and muddy liquid went by the name of coffee. Johnny thought it was coffee, an excellent coffee. That was one of the fewer last illusions that remained to him. He had never drunk real coffee in his life. In addition to the bread, there was a small piece of cold pork. His mother refilled his cup with coffee. As he was finishing the bread, he began to watch if more was forthcoming. She intercepted his questioning glance. "Now, don't be hoggish, Johnny," was her comment. "You've had your share. Your brothers and sisters are smaller than you." He did not answer the rebuke. He was not much of a talker. Also, he ceased his hungry glancing for more. He was uncomplaining with a patience that was terrible as the school in which it had been learned. He finished his coffee, wiped his mouth on the back of his hand, and started to rise. "Wait a second," she had hastily. "I guess the loaf can stand you another slice, a thin one." They were legitimate in her actions. With all the seeming of cutting a slice from the loaf for him, she put the loaf and slice back in the bread box and conveyed to him one of her own 2 slices. She believed she had deceived him, but he had noted her sleight of hand. Nevertheless, he took the bread shamelessly. He had a philosophy that his mother, with her chronic sickliness, was not much of an eater anyway. She saw that he was chewing the dry bread and reached over and emptied her coffee cup into his. "Don't sit good somehow on my stomach this morning," she explained. A distant whistle, prolonged and shrieking, brought both of them to their feet. She glanced at the tin alarm clock on the shelf. The hand stood at 5:30. The rest of the factory world were just rousing from sleep. She drew a shawl about her shoulders and on her head, put a dingy hat, shapeless and ancient. "You've got to run," she said, turning the wick of the lamp and blowing down the chimney. They groped their way out and down the stairs. They were clear and cold, and Johnny shivered at the first contact with the outside air. The stars had not yet begun to pale in the sky, and the city lay in blackness. Both Johnny and his mother shuffled their feet as they walked. There were no ambition in the leg muscles to swing the feet clear of the ground. After 15 silent minutes, his mother turned off to the right. "Don't be late," was her final warning from out the dark that was swallowing her up. He made no response, steadily keeping on his way. In the factory courtyard, doors were open everywhere, and as he was soon one of a multitude that pressed onward through the dark. As he entered the factory gate, the whistle blew again. He glanced at the east. Across a ragged skyline of housetops, a pale light was beginning to creep. This much he saw of the day as he turned his back upon it and joined his work gang. He took his place in one of the many long rows of machines. Before him, above a bin filled with bobbins, there were large bobbins revolving rapidly. Upon these he wound the jute twine of the small bobbins. The work was simple. All that was required was celerity. The small bobbins were emptied so rapidly, and there were so many large bobbins that did the emptying. There were no idle moments. He worked mechanically. When a small bobbin ran out, he used his left hand for a brake, stopping the large bobbin at the same time with his thumb and forefinger catching the flying end of twine. Also at the same time, with his right hand, he caught up the loose twine end of a small bobbin. These various acts with both hands were performed simultaneously and swiftly. Then would come a flash of his hands as he looped the weaver's knot and released the bobbin. There was nothing difficult about weaver's knots. He once boasted he could tie them in his sleep. And for that matter, he sometimes did, toiling centuries long in a single knot, and tying endless successions of weaver's knots. Some of the boys shirked, wasting time and machinery by not replacing the small bobbins when they ran out, and there were an overseer to prevent this. He caught Johnny's neighbour at the trick and boxed his ears. "Look at Johnny there, why don't you like him?" the overseer wrathfully demanded. Johnny's bobbins were running full blast, but he did not thrill at the indirect blaze. There had been a time, that was long ago, very long ago. His apathetic face was expressionless as he listened to himself being held up as a shining example. He was a perfect worker. He knew that. He had been told so often. It was commonplace, and besides, it didn't seem to mean anything to him anymore. And the perfect worker, he had evolved into the perfect machine. When his work went wrong, it was with him as with the machine due to a faulty material. It would have been as possible for a perfect nail die to cut imperfect nails as for him to make a mistake. And small wonder. There had never been a time when he had not been in an intimate relationship with machines. Machinery had almost been bored into him, and at any rate he had been brought up on it. 12 years before, there had been a small flutter of excitement in the loom room of this very mill. Johnny's mother had fainted. They stretched her out on the floor in the midst of the shrieking machines. A couple of elderly women were called from their looms. The foreman assisted, and in a few minutes there were one more soul in the loom room than had entered from the doors. It was Johnny, born with the pounding, crashing roar of the looms in his ears, drawing with his first breath the warm, moist air that was thick with flying lint. He had coughed that first day in order to rid his lungs of the lint, and for the same reason he had coughed ever since. The boy alongside of Johnny whimpered and sniffed. The boy's face was convulsed with hatred for the overseer who kept a threatening eye on him from a distance. Every bobbin was wound full. The boy yelled terrible oaths into the whirring bobbins before him, but the sound did not carry half a dozen feet, the roaring of the room holding it and containing it like a wall. Of all this Johnny took no notice. He had a way of accepting things. Besides, things grown monotonous by repetition, and this particular happening he had witnessed many times. It seemed to him as useless to oppose the overseer as to defy the will of the machine. Machines were made to go in certain ways and perform certain tasks. It was the same with the overseer. About 11 o'clock there was excitement in the room. In an apparently occult way, the excitement instantly permeated everywhere. The one-legged boy who worked on the other side of Johnny bobbed swiftly across the floor to a bin truck that stood empty. In this he dived out of sight, crutch and all. The superintendent and the mill were coming along, accompanied by a young man. He was well dressed and wore a starched shirt, a gentleman in Johnny's classification of men, and also the inspector. He looked sharply at the boys as he passed along. Sometimes he stopped and asked a question. When he did so, he was compelled to shout at the top of his lungs, at which moments his face was ludicrously contorted with the strain of making himself heard. His quick eye noted the empty machine alongside of Johnny's, but he said nothing. Johnny also caught his eye, and he stopped abruptly. He caught Johnny by the arm, drawn back a step from the machine, but with an exclamation of surprise, he released the arm. Pretty skinny, the superintendent laughed anxiously. Pipe stems was the answer. Look at the legs, the boy's got the ricket, incipient, but he's got them. If epilepsy don't get him in the end, it'll be because the tuberculosis gets him first. Johnny listened but did not understand. Furthermore, he was not interested in future ills. There were an immediate and more serious ill that threatened him in the form of the inspector. Now, my boy, I want you to tell me the truth, the inspector said, or shouted, bending close to the boy's head to make him. How old are you? 14, Johnny lied. And he lied with the full force of his lungs, so loudly did he lie that it started him off in a dry hacking cough that lifted the limp which had been settling in his lungs all morning. At 16 at the least, said the superintendent. At 60, snapped the inspector. He's always looked this way. How long? Asked the inspector quickly. 4 years, never gets a bit older. Or younger, I dare say. Suppose he's worked here all those years. Off and on, that was before the new laws were passed. Superintendent hastened to add. Machine idle? The inspector asked, pointing to the unoccupied machine beside Johnny, in which the part-filled bobbins were flying like mad. Looks that way. The superintendent motioned the overseer to him and shouted in his ear and pointed to the machine. Machine's idle, he reported back to the inspector. They passed on, and Johnny returned to his work, relieved in that the ill had been averted. But the one-legged boy were not so fortunate. The sharp-eyed inspector hauled him out at arm's length from the bin truck. His lips were quivering, and his face had all the expression of one upon whom was fallen profound and irredeemable disaster. The overseer looked astounded, as though for the first time he had laid eyes on the boy, while the superintendent's face expressed shock and displeasure. I know him, the inspector said. He's 12 years old. They've had him discharged from 3 factories outside the year. This makes the 4th. He turned to the one-legged boy. You promised me word of honour that you'd go to school. The one-legged boy burst into tears. Please, Mr. Inspector, 2 babies died on us and we're awful poor. What makes you cough that way? The inspector demanded as though charging him with a crime. And as in denial of guilt, the one-legged boy replied, It ain't nothing. I just caught a cold last week, Mr. Inspector, that's all. In the end, the one-legged boy went out of the room with the inspector, the latter accompanied by the anxious and protesting superintendent. After that monotony settled down again. The long morning and the longer afternoon wore away, and the whistle blew for quitting time. Darkness had already fallen when Johnny passed out through the factory gate. In the interval, the sun had made a golden ladder of the sky, flooded the world with its gracious warmth, and dropped down and disappeared into the west behind a ragged skyline of housetops. Supper was a family meal of the day, the one meal at which Johnny encountered his younger brothers and sisters. It partook of the nature of an encounter to him, for he was very old, or they were distressingly young. He had no patience with their excessive and amazing juvenility. He did not understand it. His own child was too far behind him. He was like an old and irritable man, annoyed by the turbulence of their young spirit that was to him arrant silliness. He glowered silently over his food, finding compensation in the thought that they would soon have to go to work. That would take the edge off them and make them sedate and dignified like him. Thus it was, after the fashion of the human, that Johnny made of himself a yardstick with which to measure the universe. During the meal, his mother explained in various ways, and with infinite repetition, that she was trying to do the best she could, so that it was with relief that the scant meal ended. And Johnny shoved back a chair and arose. He debated for a moment between bed and the front door, and finally went out the latter. He did not go far. He sat down on the stoop, his knees drawn up, his narrow shoulders drooping forward, his elbows on his knees, and the palms of his hands supporting his chin. As he sat there, he did no thinking. He was just resting. So far as his mind was concerned, they were asleep. His brothers and sisters come out, and with other children, played noisily about him. An electric globe on the corner lighted their follies. They were peevish and irritable when they knew that the spirit of adventure lured them into teasing him. They joined hands before him, and keeping time with their bodies, chanted in his face, weird and an uncomplimentary doggerel. At first he snarled curses he had learned from the lips of various foremen. Finding this futile and remembering his dignity, he relapsed into dogged silence. His brother Will, next to him in age, having just passed his 10th birthday, was the ringleader. Johnny did not possess particularly kindly feelings towards him. His life had early been embittered by continual giving over and giving way to Will. He had a definite feeling that Will was greatly in his debt, and were ungrateful about it. In his own playtime, back in the dim past, he had been robbed of a large part of that playtime by being compelled to take care of Will. Will were a baby then, and then, as now, their mother had spent her days in the mills. To Johnny had fallen the part of little father and little mother as well. All seemed to show the benefit of the grieving over and the giving away. He was well built, fairly rugged, as tall as his elder brother and even heavier. Yet although the lifeblood of one had been diverted into the other's veins, and in spirits it was the same. Johnny was jaded, worn out, without resilience, while his younger brother seemed bursting and spilling over with exuberance. The knocking chant rose louder and louder. Will leaned closer as he danced, thrusting out his tongue. Johnny's left arm shot out and caught the other around the neck. At the same time he wrapped his bony fist on the other's nose. It was a pathetically bony fist, but that was sharp to her, as evidenced by the squeal of pain that it produced. The other children were uttering frightened cries, while Johnny's sister, Jenny, had dashed into the house. He thrust Will from him, kicked him savagely on the shins, then reached for him, slamming him face down onto the dirt. Nor did he release him till the face had been rubbed in the dirt several times. Then the mother arrived, an anemic whirlwind of solicitude and maternal wrath. "Why can't you leave me alone?" was Johnny's reply without breathing. "Can't you see I'm tired? I'm as big as you," Will raised in her arms, his face a mess of tears and dirt and blood. "I'm as big as you now, and I'm going to get bigger, and I'll lick you, see if I don't." "You ought to be working, seeing how big you are," Johnny smiled. "That's what's the matter with you. You ought to work. It's up to your ma to put you to work." "But he's too young," she protested. "He's only a little boy." "I was younger than him when I started to work." Johnny's mouth opened further to express the sense of unfairness that he felt, but the mouth closed with a snap. He turned gloomily on his heel and stalked into the house and the bed. The door of his room were opened to let a warmth in from the kitchen. As he undressed in the semi-darkness, he could hear his mother talking with a neighbour woman who had dropped in. His mother was crying, and the speech was punctuated with the spiritless sniffs. "I can't make out what's getting into Johnny," he could hear her say. "He didn't used to be this way. You were a patient little angel. And he is a good boy," she hastened to defend. "He's worked faithful, and he did go to work too young. It wasn't my fault. I did the best I can, I'm sure." Her aunt sniffling from the kitchen, and Johnny murmured to himself as his eyelids closed down. "You bet your life I worked faithful." Next morning he was torn bodily by his mother from the grip of sleep, and come the meagre breakfast, the tramp thought through the dark and the pale glimpse of day across the housetops as he turned his back on it and went in through the factory gate. It were another day of all the days, and all the days were alike. And yet there had been variety in his life. At times he changed from one job to another, and was taken sick. When he was 6, he was little mother and father to Will and the other children still younger. At 7 he went up into the mills, winding bobbins. When he was 8 he got work at another mill. His new job was marvellous easy. All he had to do was sit down with a little stick in his hand and guard a stream of cloth that flowed past him. The stream of cloth flowed out the moor of a machine, passed over an hot roller, and went on its way elsewhere. He sat always in the one place, beyond the reach of daylight, a gas jet fluttering over him, himself part of the mechanism. He was very happy at that job in spite of the moist heat, for he was still young and in possession of dreams and illusions. And wonderful dreams he dreamed as he watched the steaming cloth streaming endlessly by. There were no exercise about the work, no call upon his mind, and he dreamed less and less while his mind grew torpid and drowsy. Nevertheless, he earned $2 a week, and $2 represented the difference between acute starvation and chronic underfeeding. When he was 9 he lost his job. Measles were the cause of it. After he recovered he got work at a glass factory. The pay were better and the work demanded skill. It was piecework, and the more skillful he was the bigger wages he earned. Here was incentive, and under this incentive he developed into a remarkable worker. It was simple work, the tying of glass stoppers into small bottles. At his waist he carried a bundle of twine. He held the bottles between his knees so he might work with both hands. Thus, in a sitting position and bending over his own knees, his narrow shoulders grew humped and his chest was contracted for 10 hours each day. This was not good for the lungs, but he tied 300 dozen bottles a day. The superintendent was very proud of him and brought visitors to look at him. In 10 hours, 300 dozen bottles passed through his hands. This meant that he attained a machine-like perfection. All waste movements were eliminated. Every motion of his thin arms, every movement of the muscle in the thin fingers was swift and accurate. He worked at high tension, and the result was that he grew nervous. At night his muscles twitched in his sleep. In the daytime he could not relax and rest. He remained keyed up, and his muscles continued to twitch. Also he grew sallow, and his lint cough grew worse. The pneumonia laid hold of the feeble lungs, which were in the contracted chest, and he lost his job in the glassworks. Now he'd returned to the jute mills where he'd first begun with winding bobbins. But promotion was waiting for him. He was a good worker. He would next go on to the starcher, and later would go into the loom room. There were nothing after that except increased efficiency. The machinery ran faster than what he had got. The machinery ran faster than when he had first gone to work, and his mind ran slower. He no longer dreamed at all. Those earlier years had been full of dreaming. Once he had been in love, and when he first began guarding the cloth over the hot roller, and was with the daughter of the superintendent. She was much older than he, a young woman, and he had seen her at a distance only paltry half dozen times. That made no difference. On the surface of the cloth stream that poured past him, he pictured radiant features wherein he performed prodigies of toil and invented miraculous machines, won to the mastership of the mills, and in the end took her in his arms and kissed her soberly on the brow. That was all in the long ago, and he had grown too old and tired to love. Also, she had married and gone away. His mind had gone to sleep. It had been a wonderful experience, and he used often to look back upon it as other men and women look back upon the time they believed in fairies. He had never believed in fairies, nor Santa Claus, but he had believed implicitly in the smiling future of his imagination as wrought. But he had believed it implicitly in the smiling future his imagination had wrought into the steaming cloth stream. He had become a man very early in life. At 7, when he drew his first wages, began his adolescence. A certain feeling of independence crept up in him, and the relationship between him and his mother changed. Somehow, as an earner and breadwinner, doing his own work in the world, he was more like an equal with her. Manhood, full-blown manhood, had come when he was 11, at which time he had gone to work on the night shift for 6 months. No child works on the night shift and remains a child. There have been several great events in his life. One of these two had been when his mother had bought some California prunes. 2 others had been the 2 times when she cooked custard. Those had been events. He remembered them kindly. At that time his mother had told him a blissful dish she would sometimes make. Floating Island, she called it, better than custard. For years he had looked forward to the day when he would sit down at the table with Floating Island before him, until at last he had relegated the idea of it to the limbo of unattainable ideals. Once he found a silver quarter lying on the sidewalk. That also was a great event in his life, a real tragic one. With all a tragic one, I should say. He knew his duty on the instant the silver flashed in his eyes, before even he had picked it up. At home, as usual, there were not enough to eat, and home he should have taken it as he did his wages every day, every Saturday night. Right conduct in this case were obvious, but he never had any spending of his money. He was suffering from candy hunger. He was ravenous for the sweets that only on red letter days he had ever tasted in his life. He did not attempt to deceive himself. He knew it was a sin, and deliberately he sinned when he went on a 15-cent candy debauch. 10 cents he saved for a future orchard, but not being accustomed to carrying the money, he lost the 10 cents. This occurred at a time when he was suffering from all the torments of conscience, and it was to him an act of divine retribution. He had a frightened sense of the closeness of an awful and wrathful God. God had seen, and God had been swift to punish, denying him even the full wages of sin. In memory he always looked back upon the event as the one great criminal deed of his life, and at the recollection of his conscience always awoke and gave him another twinge. It was the one skeleton in his closet. Also, being so made in circumstance, he looked back upon the deed with regret. He was dissatisfied with the manner in which he had spent the quarter. He could have invested it better, and, out of his later knowledge of the questions of God, he would have beaten God out by spending the whole quarter at one fell swoop. In retrospect, he spent the quarter 1,000 times, and each time the better advantage. One other memory of the past, dim and faded, but stamped into his soul everlasting by the savage feet of his father. It was more like a nightmare than a remembered vision of a concrete thing, more like the race memory of man that makes him fall into his sleep and goes back to arboreal ancestry. This particular memory never come to Johnny in broad daylight when he was wide awake. It come at night in bed at the moment that his consciousness was sinking down and losing itself in sleep. He always aroused in the frightened wakefulness, and for the moment, in the first sickening start, it seemed to him that he lay crosswise on the floor of the bed. In the bed were the vague forms of his father and mother. He never saw what his father looked like. He had but one impression of his father, and that was that he had savage and pitiless feet. His earlier memories lingered with him, but he had no late memories. All days were alike. Yesterday or last year were the same, 1,000 years or a minute. Nothing ever happened. There were no events to mark the march of time. Time did not march, it stood always still. It were only the whirring machines that moved, and they moved nowhere, in spite of the fact they moved faster. When he was 14 he went to work on the starcher. It was a colossal event, something that at last happened that he could remember beyond a night's sleep or a week's payday. It marked an era. It were a machine, Olympiad, I think the date from. When I went to work on the starcher, or after, or before I went to work on the starcher, were sentences often on his lips. He celebrated his 16th birthday by getting into the locker room, went into the loom room, taking a loom. Here were an incentive again for piecework, and he excelled because the clay of him had been moulded by the mills into the perfect machine. At the end of 3 months he were running 2 looms, and later 3 and 4. At the end of his 2nd year at the looms he were turning out more yards than any other weaver, more than twice as much as some of the less skilful ones, and at home things began to prosper as he approached the full stature of his earning power. Not, however, that his increased earning was in excess of need. The children were growing up, they ate more, and they were going to school, and school books cost money. And somehow the faster he worked, the faster climbed the price of things. Even the rent went up, but the house had fallen from bad to worse disrepair. He had grown taller, but with his increased height he seemed leaner than ever. Also he was more nervous. With the nervousness increased his peevishness and irritability. The children had learned by many bitter lessons to fight shy of him. His mother respected him for his earning power, but somehow her respect was tinctured with fear. There was no joyousness in life for him. The procession of the days he never saw. The nights he slept away in twitching unconsciousness. The rest of the time he worked, and his consciousness was machine consciousness. Outside this, his mind was blank. He had no ideals but one illusion, namely that he drank excellent coffee. He was a work beast. He had no mental life whatever. But deep down in the crypts of his mind, unknown to him, were being weighed and shifted every hour of his toil, every moment of his hand, every twitch of his muscles, and preparations were being made for a future course of action that would amaze him and all his little world. It was in the late spring that he came home from work one night, aware of unusual tiredness. There was keen expectancy in the air as he sat down at the table, but he did not notice. He went through the meal in moody silence, mechanically eating what was before him. The children hummed and ahed and made smacking noises with their mouths, but he was deaf to them. "You know what you're eating?" his mother demanded at last desperately. He looked down vacantly at the dish before him and vacantly at her. "Floating Island," she announced triumphantly. "Ah," he said. "Floating Island," the children chorused loudly. "Ah," he said. And after 2 or 3 mouthfuls he said, "I guess I ain't hungry tonight." He dropped the spoon, shoved back his chair and arose wearily from the table. "And I guess I'll go to bed." His feet dragged more heavily than the usual as he crossed the kitchen floor. Undressing were a Titan's task, a monstrous futility, and he wept weakly as he crawled into bed, on one shoe still on. He was aware of a rising, swelling something inside his head that made his brain thick and fuzzy. His lean fingers felt as big as his wrist, while in the end of them was a remoteness of sensation, vague and fuzzy like his brain. The small of his back ached intolerably. All his bones ached. He ached everywhere, and his head began the shrieking, pounding, crashing, roaring of a million looms. All space was filling with try and shuttles. They darted in and out, intricately among the stars. He worked 1,000 looms himself, and ever they speeded up faster and faster, and his brain unwound faster and faster, and become the thread that fed the 1,000 flying shuttles. He did not go to work next morning. He was too busy weaving colossally on the 1,000 looms that ran inside his head. His mother went to work, but first she sent for the doctor. It was a severe attack of la grippe, he said. Johnny served as nurse and carried out his instructions. It were a very severe attack, and it were a week before Johnny dressed and tottered feebly across the floor. Another week, the doctor said, and he would be fit to return to work. The foreman of the loom visited him on Saturday afternoon, first day of his convalescence. The best weaver in the room, the foreman told his mother. His job would be held for him. He would come back to work in a week from Monday. "Why don't you thank him, Johnny?" his mother asked him, anxiously. "He's been that sick he ain't himself," she explained apologetically to the visitor. Johnny sat hunched up and gazing steadfastly at the floor. He sat in the same position long after the foreman had gone. It was warm outdoors, and he sat on the stoop in the afternoon. Sometimes his lips moved. They seemed lost in endless calculation. Next morning, after the day grew warm, he took his seat on the stoop. He had pencil and paper, this time, with which to continue his calculations, and he calculated painfully and amazingly. "What comes after millions?" he said at noon when Will came home from school. "And how do you work them?" That afternoon he finished his task. Each day, but without paper and pencil, he returned to the stoop. He was greatly absorbed in the one tree that grew across the street. He studied it for hours at a time and were unusually interested when the wind swayed its branches and fluttered its leaves. Throughout the week he seemed lost in a great communion with himself. On Sunday, sitting on the stoop, he laughed aloud several times, to the perturbation of his mother, who had not heard him laugh in years. Next morning, in the early darkness, she came to his bed to rouse him. He had his fill of sleep all week and awoke easily. He made no struggle, nor did he attempt to hold onto the bed when she stripped it from him. He lay quietly and spoke quietly. "Ain't no use, Ma." "You'll be late," she said under the impression that he was still stupid with sleep. "I'm awake, Ma. I tell you, it's no use. You might as well let me alone, I ain't gonna get up. You'll lose your job, she cried. I ain't gonna get up, he repeated in a strange, passionless voice. She did not go to work herself this morning. This was sickness beyond any sickness she had ever known. Fever and delirium she could understand, but this was insanity. She pulled the bed up over him and sent Jenny for the doctor. When that person arrived, Johnny was sleeping gently, and gently he awoke and allowed his pulse to be taken. Nothing the matter with him, the doctor reported. Badly debilitated, that's all. Not much meat on his bones. He's always been that way, his mother volunteered. Now go away, Ma, and let me finish my snooze. Johnny spoke sweetly and placidly, and sweetly and placidly he rolled over on his side and went to sleep. At 10 o'clock he awoke and dressed himself. He walked out into the kitchen where he found his mother with a frightened expression on her face. I'm going away, Ma, he announced. I just want to say goodbye. She threw her apron over her head and sat down suddenly and wept. He waited patiently. I might have known it, she was sobbing. Where? She finally asked, removing the apron from her head and gazing up at him with a stricken face, in which there were little curiosity. I don't know. Anywhere. As he spoke, the tree across the street appeared with dazzling brightness on his inner vision. It seemed to light just under his eyelids, and he could see it wherever he wished. In your job? She quavered. I ain't never going to work again. My God, Johnny, she wailed, don't say that. And what he said was blasphemy to her. As a mother who hears her child deny God, was Johnny's mother shocked by his words. What's going to you anyway? She demanded with a lame attempt at imperativeness. Figures, he answers. Just figures. I've been doing a lot of figuring this week, and it's most surprising. I don't see what that's got to do with it, she sniffled. Johnny smiled patiently, and his mother were aware of a distinct shock at the persistent absence of his peevishness and irritability. I'll show you, he said. I'm plumb tired out. What makes me tired? Moves. I've been moving ever since I was born. I'm tired of moving, I ain't gonna move anymore. Remember I worked in the glass house? I used to do 300 a day. Now I reckon I made about 10 different moves on each bottle. 36,000 moves a day. 10 days, 360,000 moves a day. 1 month, 1,080,000 moves. Chuck out the 80,000. He spoke with the complacent beneficence of a philanthropist. Chuck out the 80,000, that leaves 1 million moves a month. 12 million moves a year. And the looms are moving twice as much. That makes 25 million moves a year. It seems to me I've been moving that way most 1,000,000 years. Now this week I ain't moved at all. I ain't been able to move I ain't made one move in hours. Hours. Let me tell you, it was swell just sitting there. Hours and hours and doing nothing. I ain't never been happy before. I never had any time. I've been moving all the time. I ain't nowhere to be happy. I ain't gonna do it anymore. I'm just gonna sit and rest and then get rest some more. What's gonna come of Will and the children? She asked despairingly. That's it, Will and the children, he repeated. There was no bitterness in his voice. He had long known his mother's ambition for the younger boys, but the thought of it no longer rankled. Nothing mattered anymore, not even that. I know, Ma, what you've been planning for Will, keeping him in school and make a bookkeeper out of him. But it ain't no use. I've quit. He's got to go to work. And after I've been brung you up the way you have, she wept, starting to cover her head with the apron and clinging at change in her mind. You never brung me up, he answered with sad kindness. I brung myself up, Ma. I brung up Will. He's bigger than me and heavier and taller. When I was a kid, I reckon I didn't get enough to eat. When he come along and I was a kid, I was working and earning grub for him too. That's done with. Will can go to work, same as me. We can go to hell, I don't care which. I'm tired. I'm going now. Ain't you going to say goodbye? She made no reply. The apron had gone over her head again and she was crying. He paused a moment at the doorway. I'm sure I've done the best I know how. I'm sure I've done the best I know how. She was sobbing. He passed out the house and down the street. A wan delight came on his face at the sight of the lone tree. Just ain't going to do nothing, he said to himself, half aloud in a crooning tone. He glanced wistfully up at the sky, but the bright sun dazzled and blinded him. It was a long walk he took, and he did not walk fast. It took him past the jute mill. The ruffled roar of the loom room came to his ears, and he smiled. It was a gentle, placid smile. He hated no one, not even the pounding, shrieking machines. There was no bitterness in him, nothing but an inordinate hunger for rest. The houses and factories thinned out, and the open space increased as he approached the country. The last city was behind him. He was walking down a leafy lane beside the railroad track. He did not walk like a man. He did not look like a man. He was a travesty of the human. He was a twisted and stunted and nameless piece of life that shambled like a sickly ape. Arms loose-hanging, stoop-shouldered, narrow-chested, grotesque and terrible. He passed by a small railroad station and lay down in the grass under a tree. All afternoon he lay there. Sometimes he dozed with muscles that twitched in his sleep. When awake he lay without movement, watching the birds or looking up at the sky through the branches of the tree above him. Once or twice he laughed aloud, without relevance to anything he had seen or felt. After twilight had gone and the first darkness of the night, a freight train rumbled into the station. When the engine was switching cars onto the side track, Johnny crept along the side of the train. He pulled open the door of an empty boxcar and awkwardly and laboriously climbed in. He closed the door. The engine whistled. Johnny was laying down, and in the darkness he smiled. That's the end of the Apostate. Christ almighty, grim ones today, grim ones indeed. Well, that was awful. We see a boy who is... Well, no, we don't see a boy, do we? We see a man who never had the chance to be a boy. Broken by labour from the age of 7. Christ. Not even before the age of 7. Father and mother to his own little siblings. Christ almighty. Christ almighty. I see the point of that story. I see what it's criticising. I see the awful thing it's holding up the line. By God, I wish I had not read it. By God. It is terrible that things do to men. Things men do to men, I should say. The terrible things men do to men, endlessly and endlessly in the pursuit of nothing. A profit. Worse too is the things men will do to themselves as you give them half the chance. Christ. Apostate indeed, abandoning his family. And it's the right choice for him too. The only choice. What did they ever do for him but take and take and take? What did he ever do but give and give and give until there was nothing of him to give? And still give it after that fact. And the worst part is, I don't even really blame anyone. If the children are starving, and you got to have them work, and you got to work until there's someone around, even if a child is on asked to work. And it's not wrong to try and have one child grow up to be someone better. No wrong choices, I suppose, other than bringing them into the world in the first place. Oh, Christ. Christ and Christ and Christ, what a damn. Right. No more dwell on that one either, I suppose. Let's hope that the law of life is a little bit more upbeat. Christ, the sound of it doesn't sound like one hopeful, but maybe it's a sort of Yukon wild law rather than the law of a city. Maybe that. The law of life. Old Koskooch listened greedily. Though his sight had long since failed, his hearing was still acute, and the slightest sound penetrated to the glimmering intelligence which yet abode beyond the withered forehead, which no longer gazed forth upon the things of the world. Ah, that was sitcom to her, surely anathemising the dogs as she cuffed and beat them in their harness. Sitcom to her was his daughter's daughter, but she was too busy to waste the thought upon her broken grandfather, sent alone in the snow, forlorn and hopeless. Camp must be broken. The long trail waited while the short day refused to linger. Life called her, and the duties of life, not death, and he were very close to death now. The thought made the old man panicky for the moment, and he stretched forth and palsied hand, which wandered tremblingly over the small heap of dry wood beside him. Reassured that they were indeed there, his hand returned the shelter of his mangy furs, and he again felt the listening. A sulky crackling of half-frozen eyes told him that the chief's moose-skin lodge had been struck, and even then were being rammed and jammed into portable compass. The chief were his son, stalwart and strong, Edmund of the tribesmen, and a mighty hunter. As the women tore with the camp luggage, his voice rose, chiding them for their slowness. Old Koskooch strained his ears. For the last time he would hear that voice. There went Giao's lodge, and Tuscans, 7, 8, 9, only the shaman could still be standing there. They were at work upon it now. You could hear the shaman grunt as he pulled it on the sled. A child whimpered and a woman soothed it with a soft crooning in gutturals. Little Cootie, the old man thought, a fretful child, and not over strong. It would die soon perhaps, and they were burning all through a frozen tundra and piled rocks above to keep the wolverines away. Well, what did it matter? A few years at best, and as many as an empty belly as a full one. And in the end death waited ever hungry, and hungriest of them all. What was that? The men lashing the sleds and drawing tight the thongs. He listened, who would listen no more. The whiplashes snarled and bit among the dogs. He heard them whine, how they hated the work and the trail. They were off. Sled after sled churned slowly away into the silence. They were gone. They had passed out of his life, and he faced the last bitter hour alone. No, the snow crunched beneath the moccasin. A man stood beside him. Upon his head a hand rested gently. His son were good to do this thing. He remembered the other old men whose sons had not waited after the trial, but his son had. He wandered away into the past, and the young man's voice brought him back. "Is it well with you?" he asked. The old man answered, "It is well." "Heavy wood beside you," the younger man continued, "and the fire burns bright. The morning is grey and the cold is broken. It will snow presently. Even now it is snowing. Aye, even now it is snowing. The tribesmen hurry. Their bells are heavy and their bellies flat with lack of feasting. The trail is long and they travel fast. I'll go now. It is well? It is well. I am last year's leaf clinging lightly to the stem. First breath that blows and I fall. My voice has become like an old woman's. My eyes no longer show me the way of my feet. And my feet are heavy. I am tired. It is well." He bowed his head in content till the last noise of the complaining snow had died away, and he knew his son would be beyond recall. Then his hand crept out in haste to the wood. It alone stood between him and the eternity that yawned in upon him. At the last measure of his life were just an handful of faggots. One by one they would go to feed the fire, and just so, step by step, death would creep upon him. When the last stick had surrendered up its heat, the frost would begin to gather strength. First his feet would yield, then his hands, and the numbness would travel slowly from the extremities to the body. His head would fall forward upon his knees, and he would rest. It were easy. All men must die. He did not complain. It were the way of life, and it were just. He had been born close to the earth he had lived, and the law thereof was not new to him. It were the law of all flesh. Nature were not kindly to the flesh. She had no concern for the concrete thing called the individual. Her interest lay in the species, the race. This were the deepest abstraction of old Kosh's barbaric mind were capable of, but he grasped it firmly. He saw it exemplified in all life. The rise of the sap, the bursting greenness of the willow blood, the fall of the yellow leaf. In this alone was the whole history. The one task that nature set in the individual. Did he not perform it, he died. Did he perform it, all the same, he died. Nature did not care. There were plenty who were obedient, and it were only the obedience in this matter, not the obedient which lived anyway. No, and it was only the obedience in this matter, not the obedient which lived anyways. The tribe of Koshkush were very old. The old men he had known when he were a boy had known old men before them. Therefore it were true that the tribe lived, and it stood for the obedience of all its members, way down in the forgotten past, whose very resting place were unremembered. They did not count. They were episodes. They had passed away like clouds from a summer sky. He also were an episode and would pass away. Nature did not care. To life she set one task, gave one law. To perpetuate was the task of life. Its law was death. The maiden were a good creature to look upon, full-breasted and strong, with spring to her step and light in her eyes. But her task were yet before her. The light in her eyes brightened, the step quickened. She were now bold with the young men, and now timid, and she gave them of her own unrest. And ever she grew fairer and yet fairer to look upon, till some unable no longer to behold himself took her to his lodge, and cook and toil for him, and had become the mother of his children. With the coming of her offspring, her looks left her, her limbs dragged, shuffled, her eyes dimmed and bleared, and only the little children found joy against the weathered cheek of the old squaw by the fire. Her task was done. A little while on the first pinch of famine or the long trail, and she would be left, even as he had been left in the snow with a little pile of wood. Such were the law. He placed the stick carefully upon the fire and resumed his meditation. It was the same everywhere with all things. The mosquitoes vanquished with the first frost. The little tree squirrel crawled away to die. When age set upon the rabbit, it became slow and heavy and could no longer outfoot its enemies. Even the big bull-face grew clumsy and blind and quarrelsome in the end, to be dragged down by an handful of yelping huskins. He remembered how he had abandoned his own father on an upper reach of the Klondike one winter, the winter before the missionary came with his talk books and box of medicines. Many a time had Kush smacked his lips over the recollection of that box, though now his mouth refused to moisten. The painkiller had been especially good, but the missionary were a bother after all, for he brought no meat into the camp, and he ate heartily, and the hunters grumbled, but he chilled his lungs on the divide by the mail, and the dogs afterwards nosed the stones away and fought over his bones. Koskoosh placed another stick on the fire and arced back deeper into the past. At the time of the Great Famine, when the old men crouched empty-bellied to the fire, and let fall from their lips dim traditions of the ancient day when the Yukon ran wide open for 3 winters, and then lay frozen for 3 summers. He had lost his mother in that famine. In the summer the salmon run had failed, and the tribe looked forward to the winter and the coming of the caribou. And the winter came, but with it there were no caribou. Never had the like been known, not even in the lives of the old men. But the caribou did not come, and it was the 7th year, and the rabbits had not replenished, and the dogs were naught but bundles of bone. And through the long darkness the children wailed and died, and the women and the old men, and not 1 in 10 of the tribe had lived to meet the sun when it come back in the spring. That was a famine. But he had seen times of plenty too, when the meat boiled in their hands, and the dogs were fat and worthless were overeaten. Times when they let the game go unkilled, and the women were fertile, and the lodges were cluttered with sprawling men, children, and women, children. Then it was the men became high-stomached, and revived ancient quarrels, and crossed the divides to the south to kill the Pelees, and to the west that they might sit by the dead fires of the Tanners. He remembered when a boy, during a time of plenty, when he saw a moose pulled down by the wolves. Zing-Ha lay with him in the snow and watched. Zing-Ha, who later became the craftiest of hunters, and who in the end fell through an airhole on the Yukon. They found him a month afterwards, just as he had crawled halfway out and frozen stiff to the ice. But the moose, Zing-Ha and he had gone out that day to play at hunting, after the manner of their fathers. On the bed of the creek they struck the fresh tracks of a moose, and with it the tracks of many wolves. An old one, Zing-Ha, who were quicker at reading signs, said. An old one who cannot keep up with the earth. The wolves had cut him off, out from his brothers, and they would never leave him. And it was so. They were their way. By day and by night, never resting, snarl on his heels, snapping at his nose, they would stay by him to the end. How Zing-Ha and he felt the blood had lust quicken. The finish would be a sight to see. Eager-footed they took the trail, and even he, Kush-Kush, slow of sight and unadverse tracker, could have followed it blind if it was so wide. Hot were they on the heels of the chase, reading the grim tragedy with fresh wit at every step. Now they come to where the moose made a stand. Twice the length of a grown man's body in every direction had the snow been stamped about and tossed up. In the midst were the deep impressions of the splayed hoof game, and about everywhere were the lighter footmarks of the wolves. Some, while their brothers harried the kill, had lain on one side and rested. The full stretched impress of their bodies in the snow were perfect, as they made the moment before. One wolf had been caught in a wild lunge of the maddened victim and trampled to death. A few bones, well picked, bore witness. Again they ceased the uplift of their snowshoes at the second stand. Here the great animal had fought desperately. Twice he had been dragged down, as the snow attested, and twice he had shaken his assailants clear and gained his footing once more. He had done his task long since, but nonetheless life was dear to him. Zing-Ha said it was a strange thing a moose once down to get free again, but this one certainly had. The shaman would see signs and wonders in this when they told him. And yet again they come to where the moose had made to mount the bank and gain the timber, but his foes had laid on from behind till he reared and fell back upon them, crushing 2 deep in the snow. But plain the kill were at hand, for their brothers had left them untouched. 2 more stands were hurried past, brief in length and very close together. The trail were red now, and the clean stride of the great beast had grown short and slovenly. Then they heard the first sound of the battle, not the full-throated chorus of the chase, but a short, snappy bark which spoke of close quarters and teeth to flesh. Crawling up the wind, Zing-Ha bellied it through the snow, and with him crept Koskoosh, who was to be chief of the tribesmen in the years to come. Together they shoved aside the underbranches of a young spruce and peered forth. Yet at the end they saw. The picture, like all of youth and presence, was still strong with him, and his dim eyes watched at the end played out vividly in that far-off time. Koskoosh marvelled at this, for in the days which followed, when he were leader of men and the head of councillors, he had done great deeds, and made his name a curse in the mouths of the Pelees, to say naught of the strange white man he had killed knife to knife in open fight. For long he pondered on the days of his youth, till the fire died down and the frost bit deeper. He replenished it with 2 sticks this time, and gauged his grip on life by what remained. If Sip come to her had only remembered her grandfather and gathered a larger armful, his hours would have been longer. It would have been easy, but she were ever a careless child, and honoured not her ancestors from the time of Beaver. The Beaver, son of Zing-Ha, first cast eyes upon her. Well, what mattered it? Had he not done likewise in his own quick youth? For a while he listened to silence. Perhaps the heart of his son might have softened when he would come back with the dogs to take his old father on with the tribe to where the caribou run thick, and the fat hung heavy upon them. He strained his ears, his restless brain for the moment stilled. Not a stir, nothing. He alone took breath in the midst of the great silence. He was very lonely. Hark, what was that? A chill passed over his body. The familiar long drawn howl broke the void, and it was close at hand. Then on his darkened eye were projected a vision of the moose, the old bull moose, torn flanks and bloody sides, the riddled mane and the great branching horns, down low and tossing at the last. He saw the flashing forms of the grey, the gleaming eyes, the lolling tongues, the slavering fangs. And he saw the inexorable circle close in till it became a dark point in the midst of the stamp of snow. A cold muzzle thrust against his cheek, and at its touch his soul leaped back to the present. His hands shot into the fire and dragged out a burning faggot. Overcome for the nonce by his hereditary fear of man, the brute retreated, raising a prolonged call to his brothers, and greedily they answered, till a ring of crouching, jaw-slobbered grey was stretched round about. The old man listened to the drawing of this circle. He waved his brand wildly, and sniffs turned to snarls, but the patterned brutes refused to scatter. Now one wormed his chest forward, dragging his haunches after, now a second, now a third, never a one drew back. Why should he cling to life? He asked, and dropped the blazing stick in the snow. It sizzled and went out. The circle grunted uneasily, but held its own. Again he saw the last stand of the old bull moose, and Kuskush dropped his head wearily upon his knees. What did it matter after all, were it not the law of love? That's the end of what I'm going to call a very depressing trilogy of Jack London stories. Lord. Seems I saved all the worst ones for last. Christ almighty. I mean, that one's just... Well, there's some beauty to that one. I like that one better than the last one, certainly. I think I like it best of all three of them, but still, it's the reminiscing of an old man on the fact that everything must die, himself included, and that his time is nigh. Christ almighty. Cheerful story, isn't it? Cheerful indeed. Well, what is there to say about it, really? Not much more than that. It's true, of course, everything's got to die, but you're stuck in the moment of it. I suppose all we've seen really today in London, most of it, is his pen-sharp transformation. We see a man who's left his home, and by moving among the world that is unknown to him, has been transformed such that he cannot stay there. We see a young boy transformed into a machine, and we see a man transformed step by step into a corpse, into meat. Of course, we do see a little bit of the dog in the last story. London does like them, but yeah, no. Transformation today, and I guess maybe a bit of gold in the second one, the importance of wealth, the way it changes men and requires them to be something they ain't. Lord. Lord, Lord, Lord. I'm glad we didn't do these in the Londonathon. I think they would have depressed me to the point that I might have given up. It depressed me now, Jesus. Well, I was thinking about, well, like I said, I was thinking about maybe starting the Sea Wolf, but I think probably I'll go out and try and find some more short stories for tomorrow. Because I think I need a break from Jack London for a little bit. I still think he's good, and I like most of his stuff, but by Lord was I depressing. I'm glad we ended on the leper last night. Or not last night, night before last. It was a good one. And these were not good points to end, but this is where we're ending, so. As always, for anyone who stopped by to listen, or is listening to thank you, in the future, thank you. And as always, ta-ra!